Hello and thank you for joining us. Today's session is about deploying Ubuntu Linux Server Edition as a virtualized guest on Windows Server 2008 R2 Hyper-V. Now for a quick view of the topics we will discuss today. For those of you who are new to Microsoft Windows Server 2008 R2 and Hyper-V, I will provide a quick overview of the Microsoft virtualization platform. Then we will list all the requirements for deploying Ubuntu Server on Hyper-V and continue to show you the steps on how to install it. We then configure a new virtual machine guest for Ubuntu, install the base operating system from an ISO, and then install the integration components. We will finish with talking about the most recent release of Ubuntu and Microsoft's integration components. Hyper-V comes as a feature of Windows Server 2008 and 2008 R2, or as a standalone GUI-list distribution. When enabled on your server, resources like CPU load, memory allocation, disk, and network I/O are now managed by the hypervisor. Hyper-V and virtualization allow you to simplify deployment, improve manageability, increase resilience in your data center, and reduce overall costs. If you wish to learn more about Hyper-V, please go to microsoft.com/virtualization or the screencasts in this series running SLES and Hyper-V. Now let's talk about running Ubuntu Linux Server on Hyper-V. In the following demo, we assume you do have some basic experience with Windows, like using a remote desktop and utilizing ISO images. We also expect that you have already allocated a system and enabled the Hyper-V role. The Ubuntu Server Edition ISO can be downloaded from ubuntu.com. We will be using version 9.1. The initial installation of Ubuntu Server does not include the KDE desktop, so I will show you how to install the base system virtualized on Hyper-V, then take you into the additional tasks on adding components such as SSH and the Linux integration components using the command line. With regards to actual time, on a standard server it takes about 2 to 3 hours from the moment you start the Ubuntu installation until it is fully configured with the ICs and the added drivers, but for the purpose of this presentation we will compress that installation time to fit within the time frame of this presentation. The first step is to use Hyper-V Manager on Windows Server 2008 R2. You can do this in 3 ways. On the system itself, where you can simply launch Hyper-V Manager from another server or Windows 7 client using the remote server administration tools, or via remote desktop session. So let's get started. We'll start by creating a new virtual machine in the Hyper-V Manager by clicking New from the Actions pane and selecting Virtual Machine. Then we will name our virtual machine. Virtual machine names may not match the Windows name, but it is good practice to keep them the same for the sake of continuity. Next, we will select a location to store our virtual machine. We will assign 1 gig of RAM, select the virtual network that we want to connect the machine to, accept hard disk defaults, and specify the operating system ISO that we want to boot from. Review settings, and our machine is complete. Then we will edit the settings to add an extra network adapter. This legacy network adapter will allow our virtual machine to have internet access while we install the integration components. Now that we've created our virtual machine, we can connect, start it, and begin the Ubuntu installation. We'll select English for our installation language. From the boot menu, we'll select Install Ubuntu Server. We'll select English again as our language, our country of origin, and we don't need to detect our keyboard layout because we already know it. We'll select USA, and USA again for the standard USA keyboard. We'll enter the hostname Ubuntu 9.1. Select our time zone, For partitioning method, we'll select Guided to use the entire disk and set up LVM. We'll select the only disk attached and confirm changes to the disk. We'll use the whole disk and confirm partition changes. Now we'll create a new user, Jeff Pike. We'll use this account for the operations needed to install the components. Jeff Pike will also need a password. Here are some software selections that are optional if needed. For this demonstration, we will not be installing any of these. Once installation is complete, it's time to reboot our system and use Ubuntu for the first time. Now that Ubuntu has been installed, it's time to log in and install the integration components. First, we'll log in as Jeff Pike. And then we'll go into super user mode. Let's update our packages. First, we will install some software prerequisites. You won't need to worry about keeping track of the commands now, as the entire guide for this process will be included at the end of this webcast. Once the packages have been installed, we'll download the new kernel source. Once this kernel source has been downloaded, we'll need to prepare it. These commands will extract the kernel from the download package. Once extracted, we'll change to the kernel directory and build the kernel configuration. Using this kernel configuration tool, we will enable the Hyper-V modules. Once selected, we'll hit escape twice to exit, save our changes, and move on to compiling the new kernel. This can take quite some time, but for this video, we have edited the process to fit within this webcast. Once the kernel has completed compiling, we will change directories and confirm that our package has been created successfully. Then we will run a command to install the new kernel. Once the kernel has been installed, we will run a command to switch configurations from using the emulated network adapter to the synthetic. Next, we will run commands to configure the modules to load upon boot. Once this has been completed, it's time to reboot our Ubuntu server and start using the integration components. Now that the Ubuntu VM has restarted, we will log back in as Jeff Pike and run a quick command to confirm that our VM is using synthetic Ethernet drivers. We'll run ifconfig, as in the presence of Seth0 confirms that the integration components have been installed. Now you can proceed to install your line of business applications, allow other administrators to control this guest using their domain credentials, enable SSH, or integrate it into your Active Directory forest. The best thing to do is simply follow the same standards you have for other Linux systems in your organization. Installing SSH is as easy as a simple command. From a shell prompt, we'll run apt-get install SSH. The package will download and install. Then we'll do a quick check of our IP, and then switch to our Windows host where we'll run PuTTY. Enter the IP for our Linux server, check the port in SSH, and connect. We'll log on as Jeff Pike, and just like that, we have access to our Linux server from a Windows host. This could be done from anywhere on the network. Since the integration components have been contributed to Linux, they have been included in recent versions of the Linux kernel. This allows you to add high-performance support for Hyper-V without the need to download the integration components from Microsoft. While Ubuntu is a distribution that is not currently supported by Microsoft on Hyper-V, the latest Ubuntu 10.04 workstation is based on a kernel version that includes the integration components. Let's walk through installing those now. From a shell prompt within our Ubuntu 10 desktop, we can easily enable the integration components by editing a single modules file. We will simply add the 4 Hyper-V integration component modules to load upon startup. Once they are entered, we can save changes, run a quick update, and then reboot our virtual machine. Once the virtual machine is restarted, we will log back on. Open a new terminal session. ifconfig shows us that our Ethernet is now Seth0 using a synthetic Ethernet adapter. As promised, here are the links for details on the actions that we performed in this session. In summary, we showed you how Ubuntu 9.1 is able to run in Hyper-V using the integration components. By utilizing these, you can improve the overall performance of your virtual machine. We have also shown how the integration components work with the latest release of Ubuntu 10.04. For additional information and resources, please visit our virtualization and management sites and virtualization team blog. You can also find information regarding Microsoft open source initiatives at the Port 25 community site. Thank you for joining us for this session. We really hope you enjoyed it.